hello. Welcome back to the What Problem Are You Solving podcast, where we believe that finding out what problem you're solving turns into what pays. We're two lean startup coaches that have a passion for quickly delivering value before you spend too much. I'm John Ruark. I'm a lean startup coach, entrepreneur, agile coach, and engineer writ large. And with me, we have...
Hi, this is Todd Smith. I just like to do stuff.
Stuff and things.
That's right.
But not really.
No.
You do stuff and things with purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Because I know we're gonna hit you up later for another episode to talk about deliberate strategy. Well, you'll have to do the long form of that because Ty can talk for hours about strategy because he's right. But tonight we're going to talk about the last of the innovation readiness levels as we've been exploring these throughout the rest of the series, ending on innovation readiness level 9, which is about establishing mission achievement metrics that matter.
Ah, John, your favorite?
Metrics.
He's the metrics guy. I'm just the strategy guy.
Yes, the engineer in me. You can always take me out of the engineering, but right. I'll still take it with me. One thing that's just really fascinating, if you think about it, they saved metrics for last, which in our world, often the first thing that when they set a new project, people say, well, what metrics are we going to do to track this?
Mm-hmm.
And I know from the strategy perspective and from an engineering perspective, that's the last thing you should be asking for at that point in time.
Why is that, John?
Because you don't know what you're doing yet.
Huh.
Right? And just randomly picking metrics, which has been an approach that I've seen,
mm-hmm.
will still get you either waste in just collecting data, or, as I like to say, you can measure the wrong thing very accurately.
Yes, you can.
The way I like to approach it is, if you're trying to lose weight, you can measure to the millimeter how tall you are, but that doesn't tell you anything about what your goal is, what your outcomes are.
I like the idea that you're talking about the metrics in terms of outcomes versus outputs. Mm-hmm. I know we've talked about that before on the podcast, but I'm glad that we're going to have a conversation about that today.
Mm-hmm. So let's see, where are we? By this part of the readiness through your innovation journey, mm-hmm. you'll have already laid out your first set of a business model. Right. You've started locking down your desirability. You really know you have a really good product market fit at this point.
Yes.
You know that you look to the left side of your canvas and you can actually feasibly build it and run it sustainably.
Mm-hmm.
So not just build it once, but build it at scale or build it continually, time and time again.
Yeah.
And now we're at the point of thinking, well, if I know I have customers that can't live without it, I know that I can build it. Now I should be thinking about how am I on track to either continue to stay in business,
yes,
and or grow the business,
yes,
or grow your customer base or anything like that. And so this is much different from the way you do traditional project accounting, like you would in the PMP type of world, right?
So it's interesting, John, because what's fascinating me about what you're saying is that the traditional world and the way that you do this lean startup world is along the lines of like how I would normally do it versus how I should be doing it are two different things. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book called What Got You Here Is Not Going to Get You There. I think that was the title. But basically is that the idea is that the things that allowed you to be successful now are not necessarily the things that are going to be that allow you to be successful in the future, particularly if you think about how quickly the world is moving. The speed at which things are changing, the way that you measure stuff, and the ways you measure stuff previously and the way that you measure stuff now is going to be different. So could you talk to me a little bit about this idea, your perspective as a metrics guy, as an engineer, as a recovering engineer, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. That's how he describes himself.
The recovering engineer.
Talk to me about your perspective on what got you here is not going to get you there.
Right. So if you look at again, the PMBOK, the PM body of knowledge, the INCOSI systems engineering approach to system development, product development, it is very much focused on getting you to, big assumption, that you have all the requirements identified. How are you spending money to efficiently deliver the first product? Mm-hmm. And so that usually results in the metrics that we all know today as cost, schedule, performance. Because that is, how did I spend my money and time efficiently to deliver all of those requirements once? Once. But yet, in innovation, we know that, like as you said, speed is accelerating, products are accelerating, and in innovation land, you don't know how much money it's going to cost, how much time you're going to need, and what any or all of the requirements are.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a difference between traditional second industrial, the second industrial era of products, and now this third industrial era of knowledge? How do you think metrics are going to impact that in terms of cost, schedule, performance?
Wow, that's a really good question.
I know that's what I asked.
You do. When you're dealing with non-linear product development, right, in the sense that it's not just as easy as put materials in this magic box and out comes a car or a cake or a product.
Okay.
And now you have to do with knowledge work where there's high complexity, high uncertainty. The rate of learning and the rate of experimentation and the rate of solutions, like the rate of how many solutions, not did you get that one solution working well, how many more solutions can you either advance your core competencies of your business, or expand into new products, expand into new markets, expand into new customers. And so I think the key word there is the rate of change is more important than the linear progression of deploying what you said you were going to deploy. So it's almost an order of higher level math, right? Where you're actually talking about where acceleration is the derivative of distance over time.
Interesting.
The same thing applies for the rate of change of knowledge gained, instead of did I build the product right.
That's interesting because I just as you said that, I started thinking about my son is he's taking trigonometry. He's about to we can't figure out whether he's going to do calculus or calculus, depending on some stuff that happens this summer. But it's fascinating because as an emerging engineer and physicist, that's what he's trying to become. Having the math to understand the derivatives. And when you said higher order math, I thought, oh, okay, so I like the idea that the first derivative is how many things went out the door. The second derivative is the speed at which things went out the door, in terms, especially in terms, why this is important, in terms of knowledge work. I think it's a powerful way to think about it. I've never heard it expressed that way, that what we're measuring in this terms, and especially in uncertain, it's not cost schedule performance, it's relatively linear, but the rate of change, particularly in uncertainty, to get to the point where you're doing, and that's what you're measuring.
And to your point, one other thing to build on that, you started having me think about, there's another term going out there called Industry 2.0, where a lot of this is commonplace for kind of the agile software development world, but yet in even large manufacturing now is being transformed by robotics and Internet of Things. So there's a term that's emerging now called like Industry 2.0, where they have to think differently about even those linear processes of building cars, going off an assembly line, because now the robots can self-heal, the robots can sense where there are problems on the assembly line, and you're getting a health of the system, not the health of the units going through the system. But that's a different conversation there.
That's a pretty wild thought that the metrics are, some of the metrics, particularly uncertainty, is measuring the health of the system,
right,
not the health of the stream, but the entire system becomes intelligent.
Right.
That that you can start to measure the things that are happening at a much higher macro level. That's interesting. I like that. So let's talk real quick about how you would actually go in to start those measurements. What kind of ideas could you help the listeners think through when it comes to the kinds of measurements that we have? We know that cost schedule performance is either in time, in terms of money, or in terms of actual products. But in terms of uncertainty, what kind of measurements should we be using to think about? Is there a term of art for those kind of measurements?
Right. And it took me a while to actually find the classification of this set of metrics, but what you're really looking for are what we call throughput metrics.
Throughput.
Right. When we said the rate of something is more important than did you build the something correctly. And so just try to hold that in your mind of the rate of change is actually more valuable when you are trying to navigate uncertainty, when you're trying to introduce new products. Remember, we're talking innovation. We're not talking about how to deliver, the millionth car that you've built, and you have all the requirements fixed. We're talking about where uncertainty is high and there's a lot of variables that you're going to be testing against. The only way to get through that is speed, and the only way to measure speed is through rate of change. So in throughput metrics, the most common one of those, and not just in software, but in other areas of innovation, are David McClure's pirate metrics.
So those of you that will go out to look at Dave McClure's stuff, be prepared. He drops a lot of F-bombs.
That's true. He's very passionate about
That's
this.
That's right. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So what are pirate metrics?
Yes.
If you imagine that your product as a factory and you're trying to acquire in your factory customers, the best way to categorize the throughput of customers, because hopefully they're coming back for more than just one sale, is through an acronym or an initialism called pirate metrics, because the metrics spell out AARRR, or R for pirate metrics. And they are acquisition. How are you getting eyeballs? How are you getting them to show up to the first time? How do they are first aware of your product? Activation. What do they do once they find out about your product? How do you turn them from a browser to a doer? Retention. How do you get them coming back to your product or service? Revenue. How do you actually get them to become a buyer? Because you've turned them from a browser to a doer to now a buyer.
Browser, do, buy.
And then finally, referral. How do they tell their friends and get that viral engine of growth?
Okay.
And once you kind of conceptually understand these 5 stages of moving customers through from not knowing about your product to adopting and can't live without the product, you'll see it in multiple industries too. So it's not just a software thing. But it's a simple way of managing a complex system that's moving through a lot of product development.
So here's what's interesting to me, that if we think about the old school way of doing these measures, cost schedule performance, which was very much tied to a thing, versus the uncertainty of knowledge work, does that shift the attention of the metric away from a product to the person?
Oh, I like that a lot.
Because you said the factory is about churning customers to buy your thing.
Yeah, and so if I were to channel our old friend Nick, who was on the show earlier when he talked about his human development part, the best metrics are people metrics. Meaning, if you're measuring something that doesn't relate to the human, all you're measuring is for efficiency, and so what?
Efficiency of being able to build the product,
right? But
versus whether or not it's. But
a good metric is one that actually has a human being in mind.
Okay, that's cool.
Whether or not you're trying to convert a sale, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. But even a good measure of, let's get very tactical. If you're trying to measure product market fit, if you're trying to measure the number of engagements that people have had with your product this week, it's in the vein of not sales, but did I make their lives better? Did I create more value for my customers? And so we can get into the whole value thing, because value is very hard to quantify. Here's another little soapbox I have on value. In cost schedule performance, there's a measuring tool called earned value management.
EVM? Yes.
And I like to joke, there is no value measured in earned value management.
What? Okay, give me the punchline.
Because all you're measuring is how much money did you spend on requirements.
Not producing things that people use.
You're not measuring satisfaction. You're not measuring how much they love your product. They're not measuring how painful would it be for that product to go away for them.
Right.
That's real value.
Yeah, I agree with you that the notion of value, independent of somebody actually giving you, exchanging their either attention, their time, their talent, or their attention, or their focus. There's another T I can't forget. I remember the other T is I used to spout them off. But that's the exchange. And then outside of that exchange of them to you for the thing that you have is just, okay, great.
Right. I can make a better, cheaper sign that no one reads.
Right.
Who cares? Why would you waste time building a better, cheaper sign that is no one's going to read, that it's
Yes.
going to provide value to no human being?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you do it efficiently.
Right.
And so engineering teaches you to be efficient, but not why you're doing it in the first place.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because the thing that pops in my head then is, how do you know? So we have the pirate metrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that by just by, as you were talking about, there's spaces in between each one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, prior to us coming on air, we talked about control gates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what's the relationship between a control gate and what happens in the pirate metric environment.
Oh, that's a good one, because in the traditional linear, waterfall, whatever you want to call it, process, you just don't hand someone a bunch of money and say, go build this, good luck, and I'll check back in at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, system engineering has evolved into a discipline that includes these requirements reviews and critical design reviews and test reviews. And aside from the first 80% of these design reviews are purely text, voice, and PowerPoint.
Okay.
That there is no value being delivered or captured at that point in time. And so a lot of these reviews are best guesses at best and flat out lies at worst. Because they don't know. They have not built the product and shown it to a customer yet. Here's what all the requirements are that we need to build our system. And often we scramble when we actually do the design and test and then show it at the very tail end of the linear process, the waterfall process, and say, oh crap, that's not what they wanted, let me go fix it.
Right.
Whereas, and here's the big difference between the new throughput metrics versus these design gate, control gate processes, is empirical data. What drew me to Agile was that you're building and delivering every 2 weeks, and you're learning what actually works. You are delivering every 2 weeks.
Yes.
Not the whole system,
Yes.
but you are actually measuring the velocity of your team. You're actually measuring what the customer satisfaction is with the piece you delivered. You are constantly getting feedback loops. You're shortening your learning cycles. For those who are in the military, the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act, that loop is very tight. And so what's better than guesses? Data.
Yes.
What's better than guesses? Actually seeing what happens. And so from a scientific method, if you can shorten that cycle and get learning, get data, get metrics very quickly and see what works, that is much more powerful for a conversation of what's truly needed, how much time it's really going to take, what the capability of your team is, what the risks of your technology are. All these other ancillary metrics will fall out or arise based off of what's needed right then and there.
It's interesting because one of the things that I'm just kind of taking notes as we're talking, that it seems to me this idea of the rate of change to navigate uncertainty is about discovery.
Ooh, I like that.
That you're discovering, you're shortening the time to understanding by measuring the speed of the rate of change. Did I get more customers? Did I get more activation? Did I get more money? Did I get more referrals than I did before? What's the speed at which, because I've reduced the time to doing that. So, I mean, what do you say, ooh, I had a reaction to that about metrics being a discovery tool or discovery mechanism. What do you think?
That really comes down to a core philosophy of, do you know you're right, or do you know you're always on a quest for more learning?
Ooh.
And I think a lot of traditional engineering relies on the fact of being right instead of getting it right, as our friend Nick would say.
Yeah.
And so if you truly take the axiom, the very base that I don't know what success looks like, but I'm willing to get there with data, then so the whole concept of throughput metrics and rate of experimentation, rate of learning is critical for innovation to occur.
I like that idea of learning as the learning as the core philosophy of a new way to think about metrics, and not just, yeah, here they are. Because I know that we've had some interesting reports that we've seen, some data that we've seen that's come out. I believe it was a McKinsey report that talked about how badly people predict. How bad they are at predicting and actually executing against the things they said they were going to build. Because it is, if those of you who've taken calculus, and I really sucked at it in undergrad, but those of you who've taken calculus, you're measuring the area under the curve. The best way to discover whether or not your curve is right is reduce the interval between an observation and an observation, because that's what metrics are, right? They are a categorization or capture of an observation. And I said, oh, that happened between there and there. And so, to your point, I know John, as the agilist of the two of us, every 2 week sprint cycles is very different than every 6 months coming in and doing, I think you called them a design review or a program review that happened every quarter in our world.
How fast are you learning?
Right. What are you discovering?
Right.
What are you discovering?
Right.
Well, want to talk about real quick about a guy that we follow, and I just want you to, maybe we can actually get him to come on one day. But this guy named Ash Mura, and Ash is a pretty famous in the lean startup world, thinking about how do you convert best guesses into real products. And so I know you've done a lot of work with, looking at Ash's stuff, and just help us think through and help us get us informed about Ash, because I think it would be a really good read for any of our listeners.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ash's foundation book that he came up with was a book called Running Lean.
Okay. Which I know for you was like, lean.
Yeah, so that's what caught me, actually, was the lean part of like this agile thing.
Right.
But then it really helped not codify the Lean Six Sigma part, but really how do you know you're building the right thing, and how are you minimizing the time to do that? And that's where he does talk about pirate metrics in one section of Running Lean. He then wrote a follow-on book, I think it came out last year or year before, called Scaling Lean. And this was even more eye-opening for me, because he posits in his book that the only metric that matters for growing a business, for growing a product, the one metric that matters is traction.
Say more.
So what is traction? Traction is the rate of change, hopefully positive, of your customers. Customer traction is pretty much the one metric that matters. You can measure lots of other things, but if you're trying to scale, if you want to scale, how do you tweak the knobs of your system such that you're optimizing traction?
And not perfection.
Not perfection.
Optimization.
That's a great point. It's traction, not optimization.
So what you're actually measuring, again, is the centrality of your customer to the thing that you're doing. It's not just, hey, it's great, it's the Betamax, and nobody buys it.
Right. I made the perfect cake for people who are on a diet.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you optimize the product.
But don't you like my cake, John?
But I'm on a diet. I'm not going to eat it.
Oh, come on, man. It was perfect. I spent all that time on it.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
You suck.
Right. And too often we're in engineering school taught optimization, not value.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so customer traction, and Ash does. I mean, he's probably one of the best ones that I've read about that really codify this whole system of running lean as far as optimizing your rate of learning, and then scaling lean of optimizing the rate of growth.
I love that. Optimizing rate of. We need to kind of like write about that.
I like
or something. Optimizing the rate of something. Change, optimizing the rate of traction, optimizing the rate of customer a customer value.
Right. Not optimizing the product.
Yes, not optimizing product.
I like that. I'm going to chew on that.
All right, that sounds good.
That's good. That's good feedback. There's a lot more we could talk about metrics. Oh, there is one thing, one final piece of this.
Yes, sir.
We've always tried to add a little bit into our podcast about what if you are a nonprofit organization.
Yes, it's important.
So how do you optimize customer traction for something that people are not physically buying.
So if we think about, mission-oriented, whether it be like the federal government and the military, or Department of Energy, or State Department, or in your local environment, your state government, your local government, or like the Red Cross, or any others. I think that what you're optimizing for is the value. You're measuring for optimization of the value that people find that you're trying to get in, that you're trying to develop. One of the things I think the misnomer is, well, we don't sell anything. We're not a business. Wait. Do people give you time or focus or energy in exchange for the thing that you have? Yeah. Well, guess what, baby? You in a business.
Right. You're creating value and you're capturing some of that value back.
That's right. And so to use the construct that you've laid out, John, I think is absolutely same appropriate for non business oriented, where profit isn't the measure of success, because you're looking for the optimization of the rate of number of customers, the optimization for the change in the rate of use of the product. Any one of those same metrics that you just laid out so eloquently are the same ones that happen for nonprofits.
So instead of return on investment in an ROI revenue sense, ROI for mission would be return on impact.
Ooh!
ROI, return on impact.
I got to write that down. Return on impact.
Right? How are you scaling your impact for the same dollar spent? Cost per unit value that we like to say. We're really talking about mission achievement. However you define mission achievement, whatever the best outcome for your nonprofit is, how are you optimizing the rate of that mission achievement? Because in the mission model canvas, revenue is replaced with mission achievement.
Absolutely.
And so to tie it all back together to pirate metrics, if you're doing acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral, well, if you're not doing revenue, you better be doing relevance.
See, even we know our poets. We can follow, we can read, we know R's.
AARR.
That's right.
Great. That about sums it up.
Outstanding. Good job.
Okay, well, that's it for this week's What Pays podcast. Join us next week where we'll discuss, something new. We're at the end.
That's right. We've done the whole thing. Well, we'll talk about something next week.
We got some good stuff lined up.
That's right.
In the backlog. And remember, life's too short to waste time, effort, and money figuring out what to build next. Figure out what pays.
See you, John.
See you, Ty.